introduce our speakers for the evening. As you all know, we are pleased to welcome Mark Harrington and Dr. Harold Warnes from the University of Maine with us this evening. And as we talk about process and we talk about the scientific process, many of those same things are very clearly related in the creative process. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit about what Mark has to say about his process that he uses in creating the beautiful sculptures that you see around and have seen outside. So he has a partner this evening, and he's going to talk a bit about the geology and that history of the stone. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Welcome.
Thank you all for coming. And so we're going to split this up into two segments, from the bedrock to the gravel pit, and then I'll pick it up from the gravel pit to the gallery. But our entire landscape in Maine has basically been a gift of ice, and everything you see is basically a product of the Ice Age, and everything I work with is also a product of the Ice Age. It's somewhat ubiquitous. We take it for granted. There's a lot of other stones. But anyway, I hope you all, by the end of the evening, will have a little more relationship with the landscape and the things you have to mow around in your yard. And anyway, to get started, my friend Hal Warnes will start with the geology.
Thank you. I've been done in by pollen, so I sort of have a funny voice here. The other thing, I had my hip replaced 2 days ago, and not really, but that's been about a year. But anyways, I'm a glacial geologist. I was trained originally in bedrock, but I changed my mind and went back to graduate school and did it all over again. And we're talking about the Ice Age, and one thing you left out is that everybody in this room is a product of the Ice Age. We evolved in the Ice Age. And one of the questions is, when the Ice Age comes to an end, what happens to us? Because we evolved because of a glacial climate, for all practical purposes. Very simple-minded approach to things. The last Ice Age started 2.5 million years ago, and for the first time, not the first time, been several of these throughout geological time, but this one, the Ice Age we're in now, we're in an Ice Age, started 2.5 million years ago, and how that's marked is when you have ice glaciers of continental proportions moving down into the mid-latitudes. And that's the marker of an Ice Age from the glacial point of view. And here in New England, the ice came as far south as Long Island, New York. And the big pile of Long Island, the sand and gravel and so forth, is the dump pile of New England. Scraped off New England and dumped at the edge of the ice to form the ridges and so forth called Long Island, New York. And then it moved east to Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, out on the continental shelf. Went the other way down to Cairo, Illinois, on the Mississippi, and then followed the edge of the Missouri River is where it is, because the ice pushed it into that position. So the Ice Age swept down the mid-continent, and that was the last time, and that's what we're going to talk about. It's happened 4 major times in the 2.5 billion years ago, where we have 2 major episodes here recorded in Maine, but only fragments of an earlier one. The last glaciation wiped out most of the evidence of the earlier one. The last ice started over New England. By the way, I'm eating a throat lozenge to keep my voice going. The last one started across the St. Lawrence lowland. Let me see if this works. Up about this position, and it moved. The ice started to move across the state at about 25,000 years ago. And it moved across from the northwest to the southeast and terminated out on the edge of the continental shelf down here in the middle of the floor, about 300 miles east of the present shoreline down here. And that level was attained at about 20,000 years ago. And then the climate changed in a way that the melting climate took a hold, and the margin of the ice started to melt back, and it melted back parallel to the main coast, arriving here at about 17,000 years ago, and then continued to migrate this way. Ice does not flow backwards, it flows forward, but the margin retreats because it's a balance between the forward motion of the ice and the backward melting, this sort of thing. And when the melt phase, melt part of it overwhelms the forward motion of the ice, then the margin goes back. So finally, the last bit of ice left in Maine was about in here, and that was about 10,000 years ago, and we haven't had any ice since. So that's the history of the whole thing. And the other thing I want to point out to you is when you have ice of that thickness, and what we're talking about here is when the ice was out at the edge of the continental shelf, basically on a place called George's Bank, the ice thickness right in here where we sit was about 2 miles. It was about 2.5 miles up here around Mount Katahdin. Mount Katahdin was completely under the ice. And so forth. So that's a lot of weight. And the general rule of thumb is if you have 3 feet of ice, the crust of the earth beneath that ice will go down 1 foot. You have 3 miles of ice, the crust underneath the ice goes down 1 mile. Take away the ice, up it comes. And so we have that to consider when we talk about the general history of the area. And so let's put this a little bit in perspective then. So we're talking about this area in here in particular, and the gravel pit that Mark gets his gravel from, and what the significance of that gravel is geologically speaking. When the ice got here, along here, we had an accelerated period of melting, and the surface melted very rapidly. It's like going on in Greenland at the present time. And the water is descending down through crack systems to the base. And when it gets to the base, it tries to flow in the direction of least pressure. That means towards the edge of the ice, because the ice is 0 here. It's thicker here and thicker here. And so the water tends to be squeezed towards the edge. And in doing so, it builds tunnels. Because remember, we're dealing with water, and water is warmer than ice. So as it goes, the ice, water that goes down this way flows out towards the edge and forms tunnels. And that water then picks up sand and gravel that's been picked up at the base of the glacier, like the glacier is basically sandpapering the ledge and picking up all sorts of sizes. And that stuff gets incorporated into that water and in the tunnel. And so the tunnel starts to fill up with sand and gravel. So it's a river, just like a river, except the edges of the valley are ice from top to bottom and roundabout. So now when the ice melts, what do you have? You have this big lot of sand and gravel that was deposited in these ice tunnels in a rather sinuous way, like a river system, resting on the landscape. Because the ice is gone, this stuff lands. And those things are called eskers. They're very important to the economy of the state because it's the chief source of sand and gravel. And sand and gravel is the largest, has the most dollar value of any of the mineral resources that we have. And if you look at this map here, well, first of all, this is a map, I'll come back to this, but this is a map of the ledge in the state. This one is the stuff that lies on top of the ledge. This is the glacial stuff. And if you can see it, there are red lines, let's pick one, coming down from this general area of Mount Katahdin. the little red line comes down here. And this is the ridge of sand and gravel that formerly occupied the ice tunnel. And it comes down here, ends up down here near the ocean. There are a lot of them like this coming down all over the state, everywhere. And that's what we're looking at when we're looking at this diagram. This is at right angles to the glacier flow, and I've tried to put in the ledge and then an Esca sand and gravel deposit with water running in the tunnel. And finally it gets to the edge. The water gushes out and forms a big fan out here. And that's where Mark's gravel pit is, in the fan, right there. So, but then if you look at this a little closer, you realize that, gee, here's sea level up here. And it's 240 feet above the present level. So if you go down to Jordan Pond, you're looking at an ice age deposit, and if you go down towards the harbor, you're on one of these surfaces. It's a delta, in this case, built up to a 240-foot level. You go around the side of Day Mountain and other mountains, you find beaches at 240 feet. Well, this sounds kind of strange because there's still an immense volume of ice north of Maine at this time, all the way up to the Arctic. And so all that water that came from the ocean caused the ocean to drop 300 feet during the maximum of glaciation around the world. It went down 300 feet, and the Mediterranean became a big lake, and for example. And so how come we have a glacier that's an ocean that's 240 feet above the present level at that time? Well, the reason is, going back to the weight problem. The ice pushes down the land, and so it's gone. We had 2 miles of ice over, so 1/3 of that 2 miles is what went down. And it's down here, but sea level around the world was 300 feet lower because of the water is tied up in the ice, and so they're both down here. So now the ice melts and the land starts to come up, but the sea level rises also. And so you have this interaction between land and ocean until we get to the present situation, and the land level went up higher than the sea came. And so we have shorelines that are now emerging. But those shorelines were built when sea level and land level were down 200 or 300 feet below the present level. And then the land goes up like this. So we have this kind of funny situation along the ice margin. The ice is standing in the water. And this deposit, which is basically coming out of the tunnel from the Esca tunnel, is forming a big submarine fan. We know it's submarine because it's full of fossils. I mean, not right here, but there are marine fossils. All those marine fossils, including whales, seals, crustaceans of various types. No one's found a lobster yet. But they all are characteristic of Arctic fauna. This is the fauna that today grows off central Greenland. So we're dealing with an Arctic situation here. So there we are. That's how we get into perspective. As the ice went back, the ocean came back in, followed the ice in. And if you can follow this and see the blue color on this map is basically ocean bottom sediment. And you can see it comes all the way up to East Millinocket here. Central Maine is completely underwater. The shoreline comes around here to the Kennebec Valley, comes up to Bingham, and up to Livermore Falls over here, and then comes back down. This is the source of clay. It's the source of pothole problems in the state, and it's the source of the former brick industry, and some good pottery that may be in this room made of that material. This is what the Blue Hill pottery people use, at least they used to. So there we are, and so now let's talk about the gravel pit. Here's a gravel pit down here, and this gravel pit is about in here somewhere. Can't pick it right out, but it's right in this area. And there's an Esca that goes north of it, and you can trace parts of it discontinuously back up through here. The Katahdin Esca had a river system running from the Mount Katahdin area all the way down and formed big blueberry barrens in Cherryfield. That's another big submarine deposit. But there it is. And so these things, these eskers form at the base of the glacier. And here's the glacier coming across the state from here to here. And as you can see, the ice is crossing over rock types. All of these linear things are sedimentary rocks. And the ledge. And then there are circular things like this that are granite. Mount Katahdin, this is the Mount Katahdin granite. The mountain is only a small dot in the middle of a tough place where it didn't grow very fast. But so the streams forming the esker crossed over all sorts of rock types, and therefore the esker is made up of material that is made of different kinds of rock. And I've indicated green rocks and granite rocks and other kinds of rocks, and they come out into the fan, and so they're offset. For example, here's a granite body. There's a piece of granite there, a piece of granite here, a piece of granite there, but there's no granite up here in this diagram. So you can trace the granite back to this particular source. You can trace the green ones back to this source, or the orange ones back to this source. And so then they ended up in icebergs, for example, that drop things off, and also in the gravel pit. And that's where Mark picks up these things. The layering in this gravel pit is very obvious in this picture. For example, that's the gravel pit that we're looking at. Here are the sediments, the fan layers in here, all deposited in an Arctic ocean. And here are some of the boulders here. And you can see that if you look at this one, there's a wide variety of boulders in there because, for obvious reasons, they're coming from different sources. Now, one of the interesting things that occurred to me in the middle of the night, when I was wide awake thinking about this thing, not only does Mark deal with rocks out of here, he'll talk about that, but what he's dealing with is something more interesting to me, in a way, is that right in the middle of the ice disappearing backwards, going back from the coast, there was a slight change in the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere in the northern hemisphere. The ice stopped melting, the forward flow took over and pushed the margin seaward about 2 or 3 miles. When that happened, the ice moved forward. Then there was an immediate, abrupt, is the proper term, a climate change. And we moved into a situation at about 13,000 years ago when the air temperature came up to what it is today. Think about that, today. This is the way it is. I've worked 25 years in the Antarctic, and I've never seen temperatures like this. But here, this ice sheet did just that. It came way up in the temperature, the surface melted and basically destroyed the surface of the ice down in here, and it just fell apart and came down. So the boulders that he's looking at coming out into this fan are really the product of the melting. That melting phase, when the ice melted at the surface, came down and actually made all of the eskers during that great melt phase that's felt across the entire northern hemisphere at the same time. Scandinavia, Greenland, Iceland here, and so forth. And some of it's felt in the southern hemisphere, but some, because of the way the Earth's tipped, the seasons are different. You know, when we have winter here, it's the southern hemisphere is closer to the sun, so we have summer. Then you move the Earth over here, we're closer to the sun, and so forth. So the southern hemisphere is a little out of phase with us, but the same similar thing happened there for a different reason. But these boulders that we're looking at in this pit really are reflective of a major climate event that is one of the major features in the northern hemisphere, and very important for people like me and the climatologists that try to make the history of the past so that you can project that history forward like day follows night, follows day, follows night, and hopefully you can anticipate what's going on in the future. So that's the way these are, and I hadn't thought about that part of it, but you're dealing with very important rocks.
Pardon me.
Just to put in a pitch, here's a University of Maine glaciologist up here. I'm not a glaciologist. A glaciologist is basically an ice physicist. They deal with ice. I'm a glacial geologist. I deal with the results of glaciation, the footprint. And by studying the footprint, you can reconstruct the ice, of course. And that's what we do. The University of Maine has the largest group of polar glaciologists and glacial geologists of any school in the United States and in Europe, for the most part. We're known all over the world for what we do, but no one knows we're there. In Maine. Figure that one out. It just doesn't come across to people. Everybody else, you say, the Climate Change Institute at the University of Maine in downtown Copenhagen, and they say, oh yeah, we know about that. And so you say it in Eastport, Maine, someone says, where's the University of Maine? So I don't know what to make of all this, but we have an Ice Age trail map that I won't go into. I brought one down with me, but it takes the glacial history of this whole area. You can work it all out with a map, stop after stop. And it's this map has sold 8,000 copies so far. Almost all of them are out of the state, and very few were purchased in the state. And of course, the Maine Department of Tourism doesn't know what it is. And yet we're talking about ecotourism, a state that's rampant for ecotourism. And this is the only ecotourism map there is, and no one uses it. But the point is that the geology of this particular area that I just reviewed has international interest. And we found it accidentally, of course, by mapping the glacial history of the state with the help of the National Science Foundation over the years. So, given that, I'll turn this whole operation over to the man that knows more about the bevels and box than I do. These maps are available. They're much bigger than they appear. They're available for about $5 each from the Maine Geological Survey. They're really big maps.
Is your map available from them as well?
It's available through the bookstore at the university.
No, your map, the
Yeah.
one you drew.
Yeah, that's Maine's Ice Age Trail down east. That's what it's called.
See if I can manage this fancy machine. So I work with glacial erratics. Why do I work with glacial erratics? Because they're there. I was a woodworker. I moved to Franklin, married a Franklin girl, and thought, oh, I'm going to build a wood shop in Franklin. So I bought a piece of property that just happened to have a granite quarry on it, like many properties in Franklin do, and built a wood shop. And then I thought, geez, I kind of want to work with that stuff. So anyway, I haven't been doing much woodworking since. 2 miles from my shop is this alluvial fan. And I just started dialoguing. They were free, they were there, and I just started dialoguing with them. And these are the results. This is a very old piece. Okay, so back to geology for a second. This is Waltham. This is kind of shows the power of the glacier. I don't know, this is me standing right there. This is a very large glacial erratic up in Waltham. It actually is on some geology sites. So it would have moved over the landscape and created, this is the Pluton of the Sullivan Shield. And you can see this, the dark motions here are where the stones rubbed across the glacier and created, basically created the stones that I use. It's the foil to which they were rubbed against and turned into the shape they are. These are just natural lines in the granite. The vertical ones are the glacial polish. Now this is a close-up of the glacial polish. So this would have been, the stones would have been rubbed across here, the bigger stones, and the smaller ones kind of polished it. So I don't know exactly.
There's a big one there that is polished.
Right. This is actually one of the stones that would have rubbed against it. Right. So they're different than beach stones in that there's so much force on top of them, and they're actually abraded. And the forces within this had to have been incredible. This is actually a close-up of one of the pieces here. I have the piece that's on the walkway in here that is basically just a strip of glacial polish that you can just walk right up to and see. Basically just highlighting the amount of force. Trying to create those, if I were trying to create those things in the shop, I wouldn't even know how to. Creating that amount of force is one thing, but then being able to slide it is something else. It's a totally unique thing. In a lot of places where the stuff has been exposed, this has all been eroded off in the last 10,000 years. This area where this came from was probably covered shortly after the glacial period, so that it actually stayed relatively fresh. And when you get it in the sun just right, you can see the polish as well from in between the big striations. You'll see that it is actually polished in places. And that's it, just a cross section, and I kind of purposely put it up so it's kind of like braille, you can touch it and feel it. I mean, most people around here have seen glacial polish at one time or another, whether you've known it or not. So I was just trying to put it up in specimen context. So, this is, I call it my gravel pit. But I borrow it from friends. So this is the alluvial fan, and you can kind of see, and it's kind of nice when you're out here, you hear all the little stones falling down, and every time I hear it, it's like, ooh, what was that? What was that? But anyway, they're nice enough to get rid of all that sand and pile these stones up for me. And as Hal was saying, there's great variety. You've got basalts, you've got granites. I don't know what that is, but it's awfully high iron content. This could be a quartzite down here. But it's like a gumball machine when you go into this place. So this is a piece that's right over on the entryway. This is actually a hydrothermal cast stone epidote, right?
Yep.
I keep getting mixed up between epidote and epidite. But anyway, not a trained geologist. School of Hard Knocks. But I actually thought, I didn't realize that this was green because the outside of the stone is here, and it's brown. So if you look at the stone over here, this was the surface that I saw. So when I cut into it and found out that it was green, it was like I've never found another piece like it. So it's like I still get surprised by these stones. And it is all one piece.
The green.
Green, yeah, all the balls, it's just one piece of stone. It's all just one.
They were embedded, you said.
You didn't glue it on?
No. No. This is just, you can play with textures. You can play with the textures and it changes the color, which is why I kind of like a lot of these darker glacial stones because you can get mid-tones and things inside it. So this is just a peck surface, so it shows up white. This was just one stone. These are created out of that same piece of stone. They weren't embedded. I didn't find round things in there. I made them.
Oh.
Yeah, right. So yeah, you can't chew them out. They're attached, and you can kind of see that the cracks in the stone. The oxidation goes in even deeper. So that outside area, high iron content in it, I guess, so it oxidized.
So if you polish the walls, would they look
They would be green as well, yeah. And I had no idea what it was when it was like, I didn't know there was jade in Maine.
Did you polish that?
Huh?
Did you polish that,
Yes.
or is that?
Yes, I started with a stone, just a stone,
Right.
that I thought was a different stone.
Right.
Right. I cut into it, and then I found that then like the slurry coming out was green, and I'm like, what's wrong with my saw? And then I found,
So is it jade?
no, it's called epidote. It's a hypothermal cast. Hypothermal cast it's like whenever crack, it formed inside cracks where things vent up through and they get deposited, kind of like inside a Cheeto. And so it's kind of, another, you got, metamorphic, sedimentary, igneous, and hydrothermal.
Keep in mind, it's just regular stone. All of Maine is the root system of the Appalachian Mountains.
Can't hear you.
The Appalachian Mountains stood about 10 to 15,000 feet high where we're sitting, but they're worn down, and we're right down in the root system. It's very hot, very compressed. That's what greatly deformed and chemically deformed and physically deformed rocks.
Wherever you see granite, right? I just learned from Howard a while ago. Correct me if I heard it wrong. Wherever you see granite that's exposed, there has been a huge amount of erosion because granite does not form. It's a subsurface formation, and it needs to be at least 2 miles underground. So wherever you see granite, there has been 2 miles of stone above that has been eroded away. And perhaps more. I can pick it up. See this dark area right here? That's the area returning around. So this is another piece I brought. And the reason I brought this is again for its geology. This is also glacial rubbing. You can see where this was on the bottom and actually would have helped make the surface. Not all the stones you find in the pit have these markers on them. Some of them wouldn't have been, at the bottom of the glacier, but some of them do. And that's what I was playing with this, was trying to highlight that surface. Right. And when you find it on a boulder, they go every which way. They're not like a glacial polish on the bedrock that goes this one direction.
But that's all one piece of rock.
This is the deep. Right. No, this is the one over here. This is the one over here. Yeah. And this is a basalt. This is the one over here, and this is a quartzite. This didn't have anything, but what a lot of these sedimentary metamorphic rocks have is, this graining in them, and this is like playing with the grain, like you play with the grain of wood, having the directional movement. So this is one of those that I was able to be quite minimalistic in, the form that I implied on the stone, using the grain of the stone to kind of highlight that separation or the difference of those planes, because you look at it, one thing going this way and then the next one goes the other way.
And again,
Just like wood does. That's one piece. Yeah.
one piece.
Almost all of these are one piece. That very first one was not, but most of these are all one piece. Right, and you can see, so you've got lines going this way, lines going this way. That's just because of the way it's cut. I mean, the lines to the stone are fairly straightforward. So, wearing another hat, was involved with the Student International Sculpture Symposium, and this is from 2009 up in front of the Rockefeller Building. And yeah, this is the piece that I did for the town of Franklin. This is just a large basalt, and if you go look at this, it's in the Historical Society Park in Franklin. It's got quite a skin on it. That's another nice thing about these pit stones, is not only do they show, what they went through inside the glacier, they also show what they've been through in the gravel deposit because they take on deposits from the surrounding material, and they also get to oxidize the materials which they have inside themselves. But it's so dense, it doesn't go very deep. So, so it's just the very surface that gets that oxidation on a lot of these stones. And this is my little glacial erratic display. It's kind of a call and response to the curbing display from the Historical Society. Site specific. This was actually a pit stone, even though it looks more like a water stone. It doesn't have a lot of the deep characteristics that you see on a lot of the glacial stones. And I'll get more into that. This is another pit stone. Told it comes from Quebec by one person who seemed to know, geologist, right? Some kind of schist conglomerate. But anyways, you know, it's one of those another one-off. You may never find another one. I'm going to be going through these relatively quickly. So if you see something you want to ask a question, just.
Can you tell us where these are?
This is taken from the Littlefield Gallery, and it's still at the Littlefield Gallery. It's moved from here. It's not in the same spot. It's on the other side of the house now.
It's our station.
In Winter
so
Harbor.
don't take it.
Right. It was actually really nice lighting that day that I was here.
So, sorry, all these inside, you haul them out? Is that how you did?
Right.
And inside is different from the way it looks
Right.
outside?
Right. So this is a you know, it's basalt. If you found this stone on the beach, it wouldn't have this color. It would, because this is oxidation. Because it has a high iron content. But the water doesn't penetrate very deep into it because the stone is so dense. So that skin, that surface of the stone is only like millimeters thick. And then you get into the regular basalt that hasn't had anything leached out of it. And that's typically black. And sometimes this one is actually banded. You can see the flow on the piece, not so much in this picture, but you can actually see how the lava would have flowed out.
Mark, in this case, will you mention the size of that, the scale of that? I mean, those pieces they're
Yeah,
not
that's
3 feet.
you know, that's
Huge.
feet, 2.5 feet. Yeah, I can't pick it up. I wouldn't even try. And this one is much smaller. But some of the smaller stones, you know, this was actually from the pit too, and you can tell by the color. Some of the smaller stones, you do start seeing more of the water aspect of the esker. You know, that a lot of their surface is just from tumbling through the water event of the melting. Whereas some, you know, like this one, you can see the push marks. But even at that, they're different than beach stones. This is a beach stone. This had a very even surface, very even peck. Didn't have much of an oxidized skin on it. You know, but I'm always, you know, most of my work is dealing with, you know, trying to honor the original form of the stone and bringing, you know, my own voice to it. So I really, you know, with a lot of this work, I really try to honor the, you know, what the stone has been through, and use it as the initial building block of form, and then, you know, layer upon that. So typically, I leave parts of the skin on, and that's part of the dialogue. It's actually become part of my process.
Do you cut like that or grind into it?
Both. This is just the process of both, where, you know, you know, make some cuts and then pitch, and then you know, to get the final thing, you kind of grind it in. Right.
Nice.
This one's probably this big.
And I say too that 4 years ago, when our son and daughter-in-law got married, then my husband came up with the idea, come to the gallery, you can have anything you want, any painting, any sculpture, anything. Yeah, he's generous. This is the piece they chose.
Yeah.
Right here was Mark's, and there, yeah, this is the piece they chose.
Again, you know, basalt, nice orange rind to it. And this is really, really playing strongly off the original form of the stone. I'm showing you this one again because, you know, this one, that stone I basically did nothing to, you know, and I basically just surrounded it and just used that.
That's not all one stone, is it?
No, that's not. That's
Okay.
3 stones. That's 3 stones. Oops, wrong way.
Excuse me, how do you attach it?
Pins and glue. Oops, that's a lot of focusing. There's another shot of that. So, I got invited to Egypt to do a sculpture on very short notice, 3 days before I had to leave. It was like, oh, geez, what are you know? And you get there and there's a piece of marble the size of a refrigerator, and I had to do something that I was comfortable with. So I tried. This is my attempt to build the glacial erratic and then sculpt it. This one's only about this tall. This again is a beach stone. The glacial stones tend to get more angular aspects to them because they go through water that's mostly hard, and whereas the beach stones tend to tumble a little bit more and get a little more rounded. Except this one. This is also a beach stone. But this wasn't tumbled round. This is like one of those little sheets of granite that break off, which I'm assuming came off in the glaciers too, but they were the first things that got crushed up because of just their size, you know, to be able to break, and they would be turned into something a little more round and a little more stable. That's another beach stone. You think that's basalt?
What's that?
Okay, hydrothermal, right. I mean, the only other thing I think would be quartzite, but I always thought it was basalt and hydrothermal.
That weathering rind is about 12 or 13,000 years in the making.
Right, right, yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I
the
spent a lot of
beginning-
time on
It's
that.
the beginning of soil.
That was tough. And this is a quartzite. We actually have quite a few nice colored, really hard quartzites in my gravel pit. There's other quartzites at parts of the state, but most of them aren't as hard. And this one, you know, cutting it at different angles, you expose the grain differently, so that you get you know, something that actually looks different. I had to include a few studio shots. This is playing in the studio. That's my wood shop. So anyway, I don't do a lot of woodworking. Again, hydrothermal cast basalt, really kind of playing with that point of connection. And that's it. And it's, yeah, really, really nice quartz veining in it. Here again, this was being thrown into a situation where I didn't have a glacial erratic, and not only that, I didn't have a dark stone. So how do you add color? So I decided to add shadow, and that's what the patterning is about.
Where does that Where?
This was in the stone came from the Belfast area, and this was at J.C. Stone. They had a sculptor gathering there. Little mini symposium.
How long does it take to do something like
That
that?
was 9 days. Yeah, that was bad planning because I worked it flat and like these areas were easy, but this I had to work below my feet the whole time, and so I mean, if I'd been able to put it up like this and hold it like I would have if I were at my studio, it would have been. Could have done it quicker because I could only work like 2 hours at a time, then I had to stretch for 2 hours.
And that's the original stone.
This is right. Working with the original stone shape, but cut the bottom off. But yeah, Yeah, you know, using that call and response again, dialoguing with material, which is kind of, you know, kind of what I do. It's you know, it's really part of my process is, you know, coming to terms with the material.
Question, granite gravestones will weather. How long can you expect this to last?
It'll
With a
last.
clear contrast.
I don't imagine, well, like particularly some of the, you know, the basalts that are polished, okay, so you see that outside skin, 12,000 years, it looks like that, and it only oxidizes a little ways in. Once you polish it, you're really closing up that surface area. You know, you no longer have that fractal quality of a eroded surface. So you know, I'm imagining it would last hundreds of years, and if you maintain it properly, you know, you can keep it going for forever. You know, wow, not forever, but a good long time. Now this, you know, if this were outside underneath the trees, it'd start getting lichen on it. It'd start getting, you know, perhaps moss, things like that. Which, you know, if you know, want to, you can take it off, or you can, you know, sometimes it kind of adds. You know, it's the continuing story of the stone. I mean, you think about, you know, granite. You know, once it's a sculpture, it becomes a static thing. When in fact, you know, the glacier showed us that nothing's static. You know, that it's all malleable and it's constantly changing. So, you know, I kind of like them when they get a little lichen on them. Oops, I'm turning the volume on.
Mark, when you start something like that, are you measuring and sort of marking the stone, or are you just going in free form? I mean, it's amazing to me that you have.
It's a little bit of both, because when it's down flat, you're dealing with it on a slightly different thing. But here, you know, where you've got, you know, that needs to be level to this. You know, I'm working plumb and perpendicular, so there is a fair amount of layout, but it's not so much measuring. Although, you know, to get the ratios, I'd have to measure and glide and stuff. But a lot of times it's basically just, you know, free form, and, you know, I use a crane.
Yeah. You know, just curious what you were thinking about. I see sunflower or sun, you know, in the middle, and you know, beautiful design. I don't know what is that. I mean, I know everything is everybody see what.
Right. Well, this was the first time I kind of used this method, and you know, this becomes quite loud. But when I'm doing these things, what I'm trying to do is take the stone and do, you know, relatively simple interventions that kind of create some kind of complexity and balancing with form and textures, colors of what's there. So I'm trying to, you know, in a minimalistic way, create, you know, complexities. And, you know, before I had done these things with polishing it, particularly in basalt, because you get that contrast. So really this was about creating contrast, although it did become quite a strong element. You know, really I'm just trying, you know, to you know, honor the stone and bring in simple possibilities, so that when people see stones, they're open to, you know, people go and look at them with a more open mind.
Mark, as an artist, though, going through these, then you can see changes. So, as a lot of artists change, like the whole, like was the basalt piece, looking out, was that the first time you put a hole through something?
Yeah, somewhere.
And then
Yeah,
there are
right,
holes,
right.
but then now we're looking at grid lines. And so
Yeah.
you find yourself just experimenting.
I mean, it would have been very nice of me to put these in chronological order for you.
Oh, no.
But I didn't. I kind of cringe against, just the way I kind of cringe against titles. I don't like titles. Anyway, this one's called Strength and Patience.
But you experiment with different textures with the stone.
Right,
Is my
right,
question.
yeah, right, exactly. And bringing, you know, always trying to increase the vocabulary, keep it simple, but anyway.
So that call and response that you were talking about, when you start with the stone, let's say one of the basalt pieces, you want to honor the form and keep some of the skin but you must at some point say, I'm gonna make a cut, and then does that
Oh, yeah,
start to
oh,
call
yeah.
and response?
I'm just as much there as the stone. I mean, it's a
Okay.
partnership.
All right.
It's not, yeah. And actually, as I go along, I used to use like with this one, using the stone as the basic form and kind of petroglyph or do something on top of it. Now I'm trying to have that skin, like with this, piece over here, it's about the skin. I'm adding form. And if anything, the skin being on both sides, you can kind of see that, yes, it used to be a rock, but that's not your first impression. That's like that's a secondary sense of form. So I'm kind of being much more bold and imposing form with some pieces. And some you get a beautiful stone, you just have to go with it. And I get this pushback. I'll have an idea, and I get the stone up there. It's like, no. And I've got a whole gravel pit full of stones. I'm talking tons and tons and tons and tons of stones. You'd think I could find the right one. It's like there's always a pushback. The stone always pushes back. And there's always a discovery that I have to make in order to be able to make that first cut. And that's really, I like that. I like that process. I've tried working in clay, and it's too fast, it's too malleable. I don't know where to stop. Yeah, right. And actually, even drawing is tough with this stuff. I actually, I do a fair amount of sketching, but that's basically just to kind of get things going. When I'm really getting serious, I'm drawing on the stone, because you have to get a sense of its volume and its weight, which you can't do two-dimensionally. And then you've also got to figure out, okay, when I get this thing done, how's it going to stand? So there's a little bit of engineering as well.
Was that already in the heart shape?
No, this was just a round stone. The bottom's been cut, and this has been cut. This one's only about this big. I've done a fair number of these. Now, my understanding, I'm a geologist here, is that I don't know if this is the case with this, because it is kind of, a little bit more speckled, but when the salt hardens underwater, it gets white flakes in it.
Yes.
Yes. I'm not sure if this
I don't know
is
if that's
the
what
case
that
here.
is.
I think these could be just little inclusions. Again, that's just a piece of ledge, non-glacial. So,
Do they say anything?
this is kind of fun because I work in series a lot, and I've done a lot of these forms, and for me to be able to come to terms with them, it's nice to be able to repeat them because I don't really know what I'm doing. It's like I'm learning what I'm doing as I'm doing it, and so one day I took 10 stones and I laid them all out, and I'm like, I'm going to do them all together. So I went with a crayon and I wrote on all of them, and then I took a saw and cut all of them, and then I took and so I did them all together, trying to treat each one as an individual, and kind of see what would happen. And this was my little walking down the street shot. I also did Lost in Space set with them, and then I also put them in contradance one time. So I have fun taking photographs too.
Did you ever think of polishing a little eye?
Oh, I've done it.
In one of them, or, just.
Yeah. Little things are kind of hard. I don't,
Oh.
I'm not my brothers are jewelers. Most of my tools are a little bit.
So in this particular one, is the hole the first thing you do?
No, last thing. Last thing. This is actually bowled out quite a bit. I mean, if I had stopped with this, it would have made a really nice dog bowl. The last thing often the last thing I do, depending upon the form of the stone, is strike bottom. Sometimes it's the first thing, but usually it's the last thing, because a lot of times when I get them done, I start turning them around and I find a way that works better. But that doesn't work with the plumb and perpendicular. Those are a little more, planned.
One piece of stone.
Works like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, one piece. that theme of the kiss. I call it the kiss. It's a kind of my homage to Brancusi, who's one of my favorites.
That's specialized.
I don't know how to move it. Anyways, this here again is beach stone. You can kind of, you know, it doesn't have the color. This is a beach stone too, but it also has this penetration of oxidation, so it was in the ground for a while. Another studio shot. This is, yeah, and there's not a glacial erratic there. So this has rind again on the other side. So you've got this, oppositional rind there. There again, a subform that's kind of a discovery after a while that it actually is one piece. And
Does that stay balanced?
yep, stays balanced. And part of it is just, you can, simply deal with volumes without actually having it look like totally different masses. And the other thing is this is cut at a slight angle, so I'm rocking it back a little bit. And getting the balance point, moving the balance point that way.
How much would that weigh?
Probably, that one there I think is 20 pounds. This is relatively small. Yeah, finding big stones like that is tough. Just playing with that point of balance, I mean, life is really about balance, or out of balance. Let's be elegantly out of balance, that's my... So this is a quartzite, and this is, just to totally break my rule, I took all the rind off. I just kept cutting, so there was no skin left on this one. And there's no skin left on that one either. And part of that's just wanting to see what those forms look like without that element. I mean, I always come up with these rules for myself, and then I break them. Mess with my process. And sometimes some forms you basically have to change your process to do the form. This one's about that big. Very small.
Is the hole a window?
Yes, in a way. These, zero aperture, kind of, that's what I call them, they're pointed right up. So as you move around it, that hole, that piercing through is actually a static thing because you're never seeing, it has no thickness. And that was just playing with, point of view matters, yet it doesn't. Yeah, the other thing I have to deal with is bases. You build these things and you got to put them on bases. And so I've been doing these kind of emergent granite bases for a while now. But bases are kind of work. They're always an afterthought. They're not as much fun. This is playing with color. This here again is not glacial erratic.
But that top part is all one piece of stone.
Yeah. That's one piece, right? So, but there again, playing with that skin. This is a piece of granite that was, pried out of the ground, low rise it's called. So it's not very thick. But this is the black side. The other side, the brown side. It's got more iron in it. And I'm thinking this one was the top surface, and all the gunk that got into the crack settled on this one, whereas the other side is just the moisture and oxidizing. A little more monotone. That's 13, 14 feet. There again, that's a little field gallery. And this is inside the little field gallery, and you can see the patterns that this makes. I hope you can see that. You can't see it. The patterns of the oxidation is the different. the different terminuses, not of the ice, but of the water penetrating into the stone, leaving that, the edge of that rind. And this, you know, is a slightly more permeable stone, so that rind goes in quite a bit deeper. And here again is another one where I basically did nothing with that stone. I just set it there and you know, and built around it. That came to me in a dream, and I had this stone, and I knew the stone because it's pretty big. The whole thing's like this big, and these things are 2.5 feet wide. And this was a beautiful stone. I mean, it was round, and I saw it in the pit, and I was like, oh, I should grab that. You know, but I needed to get a machine there, and so I didn't get it. And we went to Oklahoma to visit family, and I came back, and I had this dream, and I was like, I got to get that stone. And I go to the gravel pit, and there is this ginormous pile of gravel right over my stone. And I'm like, geez. And I go up to the operator there, and she's, you know, I had this stone here. Do you know what happened to it? He goes, yeah, it's right there. And I'm like, do you think you could find it? Sure. I mean, this is huge machine. He went in there and scooped it out. He took like 5 scoops and out it came.
Where is that?
I like gravel pit people.
Where is that?
This is Booth Bay Harbor.
I'd love to go see that.
But that's not where it is now. It's in Little Deer Isle now. The piece is in Little Deer Isle.
Thank you.
Well, it's some
Little Deer
personal home.
Oh.
Yeah, this is not public.
But you know, someone who loves that.
Oh.
It's a great.
So this is my shop. This is right outside the front door of my studio, and it's an old gravel pit, granite quarry that was operated was opened in the late 1800s and operated back then, and then operated in the late 50s, early 60s, I believe, by a local monument maker that I bought it from his son. They only use it to make the bases for monuments because this material has little specks of iron in it every little bit, and you get these little rust spots coming out. So it wasn't suitable for making the monuments themselves. We just made bases out of it. But anyway, now I just use it as a backdrop. And there's that piece from earlier. It gives you a little better idea of the scale. That right now, as it sits, is probably 6, about 6 feet. So anyway, that's it. Pardon?
Do you name them?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Thank you, Jane. Jane makes me name them.
Can you go back through the whole slideshow and tell us?
No, I don't remember the name. I like the stones to speak for themselves, and sometimes I think when you name it, you're like, you're telling people how to interpret the work, and often I have people interpreting my work that is actually, wow, that's better than anything I came up with, So I give them things like, within, or, I try to give them as generic, nondescript names as possible, just to give it a title. But, yes.
Your stones speak to you obviously as you're working with them, and do you hear them say, "Ta-da"? One day have arrived. Because I hear them say, "Ta-da." You must hear them say.
Well, it's always nice to have, to have something that feels successful. But it's a struggle. I mean, it's a resilient material. I try to work very fast, but often when I'm done with a piece and I set it down, it really takes me days, weeks, months to really come to terms with what I'm doing. And that's why I kind of put them in groups. I'll do something that I think, oh God, this is new. I've never done this before. This is great. And the whole world opens up in front of me. And then I take and I set it up in my quarry, or my studio with all the other pieces, and I look at it, it's really just another one. which is fine. But anyway, it takes.
An awful lot of them do tell you they've transcended, don't they? They have.
Eventually,
it
yeah,
just
right,
shows.
right. Well, being able to do this, I get to transcend as well. I mean, you get into that zone where time and nothing matters, and being able to spend time in that is really a gift. Yeah, and the process of doing these things, they become my friends, and I still just look at them and say, wow, that was a beautiful stone,
You say that that blue one was a surprise, and have you, a lot of yours had some special color inside. I mean, it might have, when you reach that, find that streak or that color, does that change what you're doing with the stone? Like, I like your bronze one.
Yeah, sometimes, but often I just let the stone do what it does, and like with this piece over here, I kind of knew the grain, and part of that comes from my woodworking skills as well, and working with grain, so I kind of knew what was happening, the degree of veining, how defined are those lines between the veins, that really, you don't necessarily know that completely, so. And sometimes things happen, you've got grain going every which way, and sometimes they just end and the new grain pattern starts, and you really can't plan for that. So a lot of that you just basically let happen and trust the stone.
Yeah, failures?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a few of them in the quarry. And I actually got my stairs going up to my shop. I've got some pieces. It's kind of my little walk of shame. It's like, no, okay, be careful.
Do you find that over time sometimes you'll go back and work something, find a new way of doing it, and reinterpret it in a different light?
Yeah, I did these. I do things that I call studies. I don't know what studies, but something that I haven't completely thought through, and just want to kind of see something. And get an idea of mass, volume, negativity, all of that stuff. And I did a couple a year or two ago, and they've been sitting around my shop. One of them was in my walk of shame for a little while, and then this year I working on a new method of trying to impose chaos. And I said, that one needs a little chaos. So I gave it a little chaos. So yes, I do, and some of these, I call them doodles, and some of these things from my walk of shame, if I, don't want to go all the way somewhere and I can use one of those, I just use it, and it's a toss away, it's a toss away.
We're a little bit over, Mark, so I'm sure you'll stick around for
Yes.
additional questions if folks have questions. And I also wanted to encourage you, we have, well, thank you so much.